Hi, welcome to Boring Money, Rich Life. I'm your host, Joy Hicks, and today we're going to talk about interest-free living. I told you guys that I've been doing some financial education, and that was one of the topics that came up this week just as I was reading through different articles and watching different videos and, all these different things. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit further because as we know, the average American is in credit card debt. I think they were saying like the average household probably has about $8,000 worth of credit card debt. Now, that is pretty substantial when you think about the average interest rate being 24%. That's pretty significant and very expensive. So, I think for me, interest-free living, I don't really struggle with that when it comes to credit cards because I just try to be very disciplined about paying it off. Now, I don't pay it off every single month, like let's say I do have like a $5,000 balance. Sometimes I will carry that through to maybe like 3 months or so, but I do try to get very disciplined about paying it off. So it's not necessarily the credit cards for me, but lately I've been having the urge to get a new car. And mind you, I don't even need a car. In 2020, I bought my own car, or it might have been getting ready to go into 2021, but I bought myself at the time what was my dream car, which is a Genesis, because I just love the way it looks. Like the grill, the interior, the sunroof and the moonroof. Like I just loved it. I was like, yes. And I wanted this car so bad that I don't even know if it's like front wheel drive or rear wheel drive, but I know that it is only two-wheel drive. And I live in Colorado where you definitely should have four-wheel drive, but I was like, I don't care. I want this car. So my car is now paid off. And then when my grandfather passed, I inherited his truck, which is a Cadillac Escalade. And I don't need a car. Both are paid off. But I think because we just live in this society where we have to have the latest and greatest, because now you think my Genesis looks good. I'm seeing all of these new ones, but mind you, they're like 70 to like $85,000 cars. But I'm like, you know what? Why can't I splurge? Like I probably would get it used, so maybe it'd be like 35 to 40,000 or something like that. But I'm like, I don't need a car. I want a car. And I think that is the reason why so many people in America are in debt because we don't need these things, but we are conditioned that anytime we want something, we have to have it, whether we have the money or not. If you take a step back and you think about it, it is so crazy because we live in one of the richest countries in the world, but most Americans have so much credit card debt and are struggling and are living paycheck to paycheck. Some people are dealing with the possibility of like foreclosures on their homes and things like that because we're just so conditioned to buy things whether we can afford them or not. And so, this concept of living interest free, I feel like this is speaking to me personally, and I'm like, yeah, this is something that I need to challenge myself with because, of course, I'm going to have a mortgage, but I feel like anything besides real estate, we don't have to put it on credit. You know, I think when I was younger, the big thing was kind of like layaway. So that's not necessarily credit. It was just, hey, I want this item. I'm going to save up the money for it. Well, actually, I was pretty young, so I don't know if they were charged interest or not, but that's what I remember, right? So it's like, I want this item, and then I'm going to pay on it. And then once I have all the money to pay it off, then I'll get it out of layaway. And then I think as our world started becoming more like technology focused, now we have credit cards galore. We also have things like Afterpay, where those are supposed to be, 0% interest. But obviously, if you start making like payments and things like that, then you can kind of get yourself into a bind there as well. So, of course, a smart investor is going to want you to pay interest, right? Like, as an investor who owns these different financial institutions where they lend you money and you pay them extra for using their funds, of course, it's a great deal for them. But it is the dumbest deal for us as consumers who are looking to become investors ourselves, right? Because all of the money that we're wasting in interest, that could be money that we can invest so that we can start building money ourselves. I was reading something else that was saying the average car payment right now is like $700, which is so crazy to me because when I bought my car back in like 2020, 2021, obviously it was a pandemic, but my car payment then was like 356. And I think it's because I never had a car payment before, but I was like, "Oh, that's high." And so now when I hear that people are paying literally like $700 for a car, which is a depreciating asset, I'm like, that makes no sense. Because as soon as you drive it off the lot, its value goes down. So, like me personally, I don't really care about paying interest in a house because typically homes and real estate appreciate in value over time. And we know that housing is only getting more and more expensive. Like, I don't see housing going down at any time. So, yeah, I feel more comfortable paying 4% interest on a house than paying 6% interest on a car, and then maybe the interest is higher if your payment is $700. But it's like with that car, that value is always decreasing. At least with real estate, it's appreciating in value. You get tax breaks, you can write things off. So you get a little bit of help. Whereas with the car, it's like, I guess we can say that we have a nice car, right? But it's kind of pointless to be spending all of this extra money on a vehicle. So when I was reading all of these different things about like interest-free living, they were just saying that you should really save up for a car. And that might mean that you don't drive the nicest car. And I'm not gonna lie, that is a tough pill for me to swallow because I'm like, oh my gosh, I really want this new Genesis. Like, every time I see it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want this car so bad. But if I don't have $70,000 to drop on a brand new Genesis, then hey, that's just what it is. I can't afford it. And so I think instead of us continuing to put ourselves into more and more debt by just these things that we want, we should really be honest with ourselves and be like, yeah, I can't. I can't afford this. I can't buy this. So, yeah, maybe I have to go and get, a regular Hyundai and drive that instead, something that I could pay for cash. So, for me, even yesterday, I was hosting a dinner party, and I don't know why sometimes I do things so last minute because I've known I was going to have people over for at least like a full week. But of course, just doing things super last minute. I ran to the store to kind of get like some last minute things. And then I wanted to have a few more like decorations for my house. And obviously, I'm paying more because I'm pressed for time. So, had I done that earlier in the week, I could have shopped around, I could have found a better price, but I was literally like an hour before I needed to be home and starting to cook and all these things. So, I'm like, okay, let me go to a store that I know is going to have everything that I need, like the party games, the food, um, the decorations that I want. So I ended up in Target, which I feel like Target just screams of you're going to spend a whole bunch of money. Like every time I walk into Target, I know I'm going to spend some money. And I'm like, ugh. And a little part of me was like, oh, don't worry about it. You have your credit card with you. You don't have a balance on there. You can put a little bit of a $300 balance on there. You'll be fine. And I literally had to like remind myself, like, you know what? Everything that I do today matters, right? Like, what I do today is setting me up for 10 years down the road. So, it is a $300 purchase, but I need to start having better money habits now. So that way, 10 years down the line, I'm in a much better place than I am even today. So I was like, you know what? No, if I'm going to buy this, I'm going to pay for it cash. I'm going to bite the bullet. And it sure enough was about $300. And I was like, wow. So that was a lesson in itself. Like, for one, don't do things last minute. Because if you do things last minute, you're going to put yourself in an unnecessary financial bind and you'll be more likely to want to pull out your credit card. So definitely plan as much as you can. If you know that the car that you have is starting to decline and you're starting to have more like repairs than what the vehicle is worth, then start being honest with yourself and saying, okay, hey, I at least need to put maybe like $10,000 to $20,000 aside so that way I can go and buy a vehicle. And then maybe you'll do a lot more shopping and research on the vehicle because you're going to compare and be like, oh, what can I get for 12,000? You know what I'm saying? If all it's doing is getting me from point A to point B. And I think a really big part of living interest free is to separate your value from your things. Because I think the reason why so many Americans are in debt is because your worth is tied to what you have. So when your value and your self-esteem is attached to what you possess, so then yeah, it's going to be a lot harder to stop overspending. It's going to be a lot harder to not use credit and buy things even though you can't afford them because your own self-worth is attached to those things. But if you know who you are, and you're good and you're like, you know what, even if my car looks a little crazy, it's doing its purpose and I know who I am and I know what I'm working towards, which is my rich life where I don't even have to wake up and go to a job because I have so many investments and my money is making money for me in my sleep. Then it's like, okay, I don't really care what you think, to be honest. And I shared with you guys when I went to Denver Startup Week and I saw all of these millionaires. And when I tell you, none of them had on name brand clothes, right? None of them had on a pink shirt. Because I think like Victoria's Secret is one of the most expensive stores for like fast fashion. And to me, it's kind of ridiculous. Like a sweater in freaking Victoria's Secret just for it to say pink is like $80. And that's ridiculous. And you have people who are literally doing it, right? Like Nike socks, $25 just for it to have a little check on there. And it's like you look at people who have amassed real wealth and, you know, they look clean, they look put together, but they're not wearing these name brands, you know? So I think the more that we start to attribute our self worth to just who we are, our character, our values, versus what we have and what we drive, it'll be a lot easier for us to start living interest free. So, what is one boring thing that you can do today to start fueling your rich life? I'm Joy Hicks. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe.